Hello everyone, Wayne Motts, the President Emeritus and Historian of the Gettysburg Foundation for a segment of Gettysburg on the Road. And we're up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the state capital of Pennsylvania, about 40 miles north of Gettysburg, and we're at the Pennsylvania Civil War Battle Flag Education Center, and I'm with Jason Wilson of the Capitol Preservation Committee, the historian that oversees the Pennsylvania battle flags. Jason, I hope I got that right. Did I get that right?
We're good.
And before we turn it over to you, I just want to say, we've said it before on some of these videos that we've done for the Gettysburg Foundation, but Jason's job is what everybody wants. You want to have Jason's job because being the historian of the Capitol Preservation Committee, he's got purview over the objects inside the state capitol of Pennsylvania up here at Harrisburg. And he was just telling me how many objects that you have caretaker of. You've got furniture. What else do you have up there?
Yeah,
Just out of curiosity, Jay.
We have furniture, we have historic clocks, we have 253 historic clocks that are in service. We have over 3,500 pieces of furniture that are still used. So basically think of it as a 640-room house museum that we curate as a museum would be, but it's also a modern office building. So that's kind of how we treat it from a preservation standpoint.
640 room.
Yeah, that's just the capital.
That's just the capital. Now we're going to talk about Pennsylvania battle flags today from the Civil War, and Jason being the caretaker. Jason, first of all, why don't you tell everybody what your background is and how you got here, and give us a little synopsis on that, because Civil War, you love the Civil War, right?
I love the Civil War. Absolutely, that's my thing.
Yeah.
But yes, probably since about 9 or 10, I got interested in the Civil War. You know, I live 15 minutes north of Carlisle, so it was a hop, skip, and a jump down to Gettysburg all the time. So I've been going there since I was a kid, you know, hundreds of times probably to visit that battlefield, Antietam, and you know, everything along the East Coast. So the West is a little further to get to, but you know, love that. My background, decided I was going to go to college for history, went further on in American Studies. So I went to Susquehanna University and graduated in 2000 with a BA in history. Went on and did some work in American Studies, and then I've had 25 years of on-the-job training with the fine and decorative arts and curatorial and archival and everything else that goes into historic preservation within the Capitol building, and managing exhibits, conservation, and the like. So.
And young folks, if you're out there in our field, in the field that we work in, because that's my background, where I come out of as well, if you want to work in this type, getting a degree in American Studies is where it's at. That's one of the degrees that people work to when they become curators or registrars or managers of collections like we have here. This place is recently opened. Jason, why don't you tell us some history about, so there's more than just Pennsylvania's Civil War flags here, although for this episode of Gettysburg on the Road, that's what we're going to talk about.
Right.
But what is in this facility? Tell me a little bit about it. It's relatively new here, before we talk a little bit about the flags. And then at the end of this, we're going to tell you about visiting here. But give us some background on
Yeah, the post-war history of the flags. So they came back. They were stored at the State Arsenal, which at that time was on the Capitol grounds. It was down at 3rd and Walnut Street, down towards where Strawberry Square is. They were stored there until around the time of the centennial in 1876, and then they were moved to the back of the Hills Capitol, which was the first Capitol that we had in Harrisburg. In 1893 and 94, the first fireproof building was built, which was called the Executive Library and Museum Building. So they moved into there, and there's some pictures on the wall of them in the cases. And you have to imagine at this time the veterans were still alive, so if they came back, they pulled them out of the case and said, "Here, you know,
we carried this."
They don't have that connotation as they weren't an artifact yet. They were still a tool of, you know, flags were a tool of war during the Civil War. But you know, they would carry them in GAR parades and Veterans Day parades and Memorial Day parades, and they were still used. And you know, but at any rate, after they went into the main rotunda cases, that was in 1913 that they had the veteran bearers. 1913 the cases were built. 1914 on Flag Day they had the veteran bearers come back and march around Harrisburg. And these guys are in their 80s and 90s at that point. And they actually had in the Harrisburg Patriot and some of the papers, they actually said they had to pause the parade because these guys were visibly upset. They were crying. They didn't want to be seen with their Victorian sensibilities of going out in public as men crying. So they held the parade, stepping off for about a half an hour till they could compose themselves. But this was the last time that the veterans would have carried the flags, and they put them in the main rotunda cases for 72 years. And it was kind of like a day we're having outside today, where it wasn't a downpour, but it was was raining, so they carried the flags around in the rain for the last time and then put them in the cases. And we'll see some of the damage that caused. It basically created almost like an eggshell furled wrapped around the staff. So they had to be rehumidified, and that's why the project, when it was done to take them out, took from 1985 to 1992, but so about a 7-8 year project to conserve all of the flags. The new facility here, we just, the old facility in 1992 was set up down at 10th and Market Street. We just moved them. In fact, we were moving the collection of flags the first week of the COVID shutdown. That's when we were doing our move. It just worked that way.
Okay.
We had it scheduled for a year, and we unfortunately just hit that. That was moved, and then we kind of had a moratorium. So this exhibition space was another 2 years in the making following the whole COVID issues. And we opened it on October 4th of last year.
Which is
2023.
2023, because we're going to have this up on the Gettysburg Foundation YouTube channel. We hope for years for people to come.
Sure.
So we want to make sure. So October 2023.
Yep, that was our grand opening of both the combined exhibition space, which we have here, which is really state of the art, and the flag, what we call kind of the vault, where we store all of the flags. And like I said, we have, you asked what other kinds of things we have. The earliest flag that we have is an 1819, 1820 PA State Militia flag. And we know that because it has 19 stars. There's only a 2-year period before Missouri was added, I think is the 20th state, that this flag could have existed. We have primarily Civil War flags, 378 of those, and 22 Spanish-American war flags in the collection. So
378 Civil War flags in this facility.
In this facility.
All carried in battles everywhere. And you've got this, Jason, you've got this great interactive. Why don't you show, I mean, this is just one of the beautiful interactives in the Education Center. So you can actually look at a flag that you're interested in.
Oh yeah, all of the flags are, so this is zoomable and scalable. These are giant touch screens, and basically we've tried to throw as much PA information about the regiments, the bearers, the flags. So it's really, as I was explaining, Wayne, it's really PA-centric. You'll find 214 battles that all of the PA regiments fought in. Obviously, you won't find some for the early Western, Pea Ridge, Arkansas, Wilson's Creek, those trans-Mississippi West battles. Not a lot of PA regiments.
Right. So wherever a Pennsylvania battle flag was carried, you're going to have it up
here. You can zoom in here, touch on them, search by regiment, search by color,
look at this.
Search by battle, and then if available, each of the images are scalable, zoomable. You can zoom into, you can see the listers on.
Look at the detail on that.
This is Lieutenant Colonel Jackson for the 11th PA.
Oh my gosh, we're going to talk a little bit about, I hope we can talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, definitely.
Because, wow. Samuel McCarty Jackson, the colonel of the 11th Pennsylvania at Gettysburg. He was at Gettysburg, yeah. Wow.
So if you, like I said, it's populated by, if you search by battle, anything that associates with Gettysburg will come up.
So if you were interested in the battle flags held in the collection here, and we're talking about Gettysburg today, but if we wanted to, at Chantilly, you'd have all the flags that were at Chantilly that you know of, or basically that are in the collection for any battle that you want to choose. And if you had an ancestry, you could follow a regiment
that's correct.
that goes in. And then you mentioned the project to conserve these flags, 7 to 8 years. It's my understanding that Pennsylvania did like its own conservation rather than farm this out. Is that right? Or did they because the cost of this, and for the viewers, the cost of this is tremendous to conserve some of these flags. So it's really probably cheaper to create your own infrastructure for these flags. Was it not? Is that not what they did, Jason?
That's what was done at that facility, 10th and Market. Basically, they created a conservation facility, had Fonda Thompson, who's now retired. She supervised the project, but there were several conservators on staff. Also, Rick Sowers wrote the book, Advance the Colors, 2-volume set documenting with a micro history of each of the colors and the regiments, and really good bibliographies for each of those. So that was a good reference section there. But yeah, really they created that conservation center, had the conservators work on site. That was the first time they were photographed, first time anybody living had seen what they were like as they were unfurled. That conservation center then, at that time, just to give you some indication of the price, I believe at that time it was between $1,000 and $1,500 in the 80s to conserve them. Now it's probably $9,000 to $10,000 per flag, depending on what it is.
I was telling these guys, I've seen 20,000 or more on some of these flags, depending on what you, and when you did the conservation work, and there's different ways to conserve something. So you can fill in spots that are missing, you can just stabilize what's there. I assume that Pennsylvania Pennsylvania took a conservative approach on that. It didn't fill in a lot of things, kind of stabilized and preserved. Would that be accurate?
Yeah,
or?
Ours are each one of a kind. So they determined not to ionically dip them, not to bathe them. What they did was to vacuum them with a very low suction, high filtration. They even saved the vacuum samples, so nothing was taken off the flags.
Okay.
Those are packaged in conservation reports. The conservators went through and documented each of the measured the stripes, measured the stars, mocked it up, sketches of each one, and photographed it. A very conservative approach. Nothing was replicated because once you have loss like that, each one is individually unique. Yes, they're all very similar, but they're all hand painted. Right. So they chose not to replicate or recreate any areas of loss within the colors. So they were conserved what you call in situ as they came out of the cases.
Yeah. Now, Jason, we're here today, and we've made a special appointment with Jason to go back and look at some Gettysburg-connected battle flags. So for this episode of Gettysburg on the Road, we're on the road 40 miles north of Gettysburg, but we're also going to look at some Gettysburg-related battle flags, thanks to Jason and the generosity of the folks at the Capital Preservation Committee. But Jason, tell us, if I'm a regular citizen here, or I'm just interested in public, when is this place open? What's the procedure to come in? What are the hours? These kind of things.
Yeah, like I said, we're open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So you can schedule a tour. Really, 3 p.m. is the last tour step off, because it's usually going to take you an hour and a half to navigate the collection and to see the flags that you want. So,
but it's by appointment.
It's by appointment. So please call our office. You can call 717-783-6484. That would be the Capital Preservation Committee office in the main Capitol, and you can ask directly for historian Jason Wilson regarding scheduling a tour, and we do that, Monday through Friday.
These, everyone, I can't stress to you enough, I've done this my whole life, and these are the last vestiges of the Civil War veterans. These are material culture items that Civil War soldiers held, and I can't tell you how important it is that these be preserved and the stories of the people and the battles and the flags be told, and we're just grateful that these are preserved. The state of Pennsylvania took the proper steps to preserve them. There are other states doing that all over. Some of them are still in that process of doing it, but luckily for us, these things, what's left of them. Now, we also want you to know some of these are not in full state. You're not going to be looking at flags in most cases that are in full state. These were carried in battles. They were kept out in the rain. They were out in the wintertime. But these, to me, as a material culture person, as a person interested in artifacts, these are stories that need to be preserved and told. We spend a lot of time talking about land preservation in the Civil War. Preserving land where battles were fought, extremely important, and we have partners like the American Battlefield Trust that actually do that for us. The Gettysburg National Military Park, the foundation does a little bit of that, but for myself as an artifact person, I just can't stress enough the importance of preserving and interpreting material culture items from the Civil War, because that's where we get these stories, and we're going to see them to get people interested in the Civil War. So here at the Pennsylvania Civil War Battle Flag Education Center, Pennsylvania Civil War Battle Flag Education Center up in Harrisburg, thanks to Jason, we're going behind the vault. So stay tuned. All right, we just left the exhibit space outside here at the Pennsylvania Civil War Battle Flag Education Center with Jason, and we came into the storage area. And of course, we've got flags here we're going to talk about, but immediately Jason came over and rolled this out and said, "Look, Wayne, look at all this." So this was really cool. These are the flag staffs of the flags. So the flags and the flag staffs, when the flags are conserved, and conservation is a fancy term, folks, for taken care of, rehabilitated might be the word that we might use. It's a museum term that we use that are here. The flags, of course, separated from the staffs, and the staffs have as much history as the flags do. And in many cases, a lot of people don't know about it. And the moment that Jason rolled this out, I went over here and looked, and this right here is a repair job on the flag staff of the 51st Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment. That's not a Gettysburg unit, but it's a unit that was at Antietam. It was part of the 9th Corps, and here it looks like this was hit, and then the finial on top is also bent over by a rifle bullet. Jason, tell us a little bit about the staffs and some of the history. I mean, we don't need to know the individual regiments, but what about some of these things?
Well, you can really get a sense when you start looking at this, you know, how much lead was in the air in certain battles, because, you know, the diameter of this staff, and you can see on this other side, here's Enfield rifle bands that were picked up just to splice a flag. And there's cases on some of these where they just actually re-whittled a new staff out of a sapling. You know, their staff was blown apart. So yeah, the flags would have been furled around these for 72 years, so they were taken off, laid flat on acid-free materials so that they weren't in touch with the tannins and everything in the acids in the wood, and also so gravity didn't take over. You know, over time the bottom is pulling on the top of the flag with textile.
So for 72 years, the flags were in cases in the Capitol building, rolled up on the staff before they were removed, taken off of there.
Wow. So they were taken out, laid out. So this is 9.5-foot staffs. The flag measures roughly square 72 inches by 76 along the fly, 72 along the hoist. So the fly is obviously your horizontal, the hoist is your vertical run.
That's 6 feet by 6 feet 6 inches for you mathematically challenged folks, correct? I mean, like me. Wow. That's just,
it's really neat when you, I mean, and horrific when you look at some of the damage. The finials, the standard type is the Army Spear, which is the spade shape type. So that would have been the standard issue ones on all the national or PA state colors. And then this one, for instance, is Halberd, which is kind of a Swiss design, or just the spear type. Those would have been presentation colors from, business moguls, citizens would have taken up collections. The regiment themselves could have taken up a collection of a couple bucks. At that time, I think a stand of colors was $60-some, so 2 colors for $60. Now, obviously, they're inestimable for, for what they're worth, but that's how much it costs to produce them. But you know, they could have taken up a subscription among the men.
And in Pennsylvania's case, Pennsylvania had like 215 units in the Civil War. So in Pennsylvania's case, there were contracts made for companies to produce sets of flags. And normally, Union troops carried two flags. They would normally carry a United States color, sometimes called the national color, and then a regimental color, which was usually blue. And they had other types of, they had guidons, they had other types of flags that were carried. But it's my understanding Pennsylvania had a contract and these were made. Is that? But sometimes, I'm sorry, Jason, but sometimes the citizens would also give flags too as well, outside contract. But would that be the normal procedure?
That's correct. Pennsylvania is a little bit of a rarity because the General Assembly wanted to appropriate money to any Pennsylvania troops that were federalized, that were going into federal service. They gave them what's called a state issue color. And that is kind of a modified national. It's still a national color with a Philadelphia quartermaster's design, but it has the PA coat of arms and the canton. So you can look at those and go, you know, after time, these men from other states would go, oh, that's a PA, that's the Pennsylvania coat of arms. We know that's a PA regiment over there. So that's the difference, where ours were paid for by the Pennsylvania General Assembly. So this is really a state collection that happens to have the other ones, the nationals and the regimentals along with it.
And the rules were pretty formal. I mean, Pennsylvania had 2 regiments in the Mexican War, so they had some experience of this, 2 infantry regiments, at least in the Mexican War that I know of. And so these were to be returned to the state adjutant general after the war, after the hostilities. They even issued that during the wartime. Look, when the hostilities end, we're going to give these back. But you were just talking about the veterans and how emotional it was to return these, and that they had carried these. This is blood, sweat, and tears, the sacrifice of people that died carrying these flags to preserve the Union, to free slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation. You think about the sacrifices made by people that held these. And the last people, I mean, we're here, you guys get to handle them, but the people in the Civil War battlefields, they had their hands on these shafts. They're the ones that did the repairs related to them. So if only these could talk and the flags could talk, what history they would be. All right, we're going to go over and take a look at some flags now that we've asked Jason to sort of lay out for us, or to have out, so that we could take a look at them, give some history related to their Gettysburg connections. Wow, Jason, we just left the staffs, and now we're over here to our first flag, and I gotta say, I'm getting chills just sitting here thinking about it. This is the flag of the 1st Pennsylvania Reserves, or the 30th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment. Pennsylvania had not only volunteers, had some reserve regiments that were later accepted into service. The 1st Reserves, Company K of the 1st Pennsylvania Reserves, was recruited, guess what, in and around Gettysburg. So So men that were natives of Gettysburg at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg would have been under this banner, and this is what's left of the national color of the 1st Pennsylvania Reserves. It's actually painted on right below where it says 1st Pennsylvania Reserves. This flag, everyone, would have been on the northern slope of Little Round Top on July 2nd, 1863. This is an original Civil War battle flag from the Battle of Gettysburg. And I just got chills standing here. As you said, 6 feet by 6 feet 6 inches, what it is.
That's correct.
Jason, what do we know about it? This has got a great history, right? On July 2nd, this thing is right in the heart of the battle on the northern slope of Little Round Top.
Yeah, this third division commander, Samuel Crawford, grabbed the flag from the bearer, Swope, and Swope, I don't know if it was just in the heat of the battle, but he didn't want to relinquish it to Crawford, and Crawford had to kind of remind him who he was, you know, like, no, I'm your commanding general. I need to borrow this, because they were launching a counterattack, and so through the wheat field, and so he borrowed it. But Swope was, I guess, right on his coattails the whole way across there. And when they got through, you know, Swope grabbed the flag back. But Swope was uninjured. We have some pictures of him on the exhibit. Swope was actually, that was his first day carrying the flag, because their bearer Bertolus Slot was actually wounded in the hand. He couldn't go on during, so Swope was carrying the flag during the second day there at Gettysburg.
So by these regulations, they had a set of men that they called the color bearers, and a sergeant is the color sergeant
to start out with. Usually,
and then you have 8 corporals usually, right? That are part of what they call the color guard. So a color guard in the Civil War, at least by regulations. And folks, we know what they do with the regulations, right? They either follow, they don't throw it out. People get wounded. But by regulations, there's a color sergeant that's usually appointed by the colonel, and these are men that are brave, well-drilled, disciplined soldiers. And it's considered a great honor to carry a battle flag. Also, it's the most dangerous place you can probably be on any Civil War battle line, because whether you're a Union or Confederate color bearer, you're going to be drawing fire no matter what happens. So in a lot of cases in the Battle of Gettysburg, these color guards are completely wiped out that are here. So the sergeant of this flag, and you mentioned his name, was wounded in the hand, right? So George Slope is the color corporal. That's the next senior man. He's the guy taking this flag.
Next man up.
Now I read, and it may be apocryphal, but I read that Samuel Wylie Crawford, who had been a surgeon, he's got a tremendous history. He's a surgeon inside Fort Sumter at the outbreak of the American Civil War. He's from Franklin County, Pennsylvania, which is just west of Gettysburg, and he will take up an infantry command, and he's wounded at Antietam. He's pretty badly wounded there, and then he gets assigned to the Pennsylvania Reserve. So it may be that Swope doesn't really recognize him. He's only been with the reserves only for a short period of time. They're outside Washington, D.C., and then they're shipped up to Gettysburg. So Crawford's in command of the Pennsylvania Reserves, and here Swope really apparently doesn't know who he is, grabbing a hold of his pant leg or his coat leg, while they're in combat in the Battle of Gettysburg. So now this flag, Jason, would have been, what do we know? The issue of this, we think, was in September 61.
Yeah, they would have been given this September 61, and they carried it through December of 1863 when they were issued a second issue. So that's why we have 215 regiments, but as you can see, this one was unserviceable by December of 63. So they couldn't carry, so a lot of what you see here, tragic as it is, was deterioration during the war. And they had to be ordered to basically retire this one and accept a replacement color, which they carried through the duration of the war then.
And one of the reasons why these flags are fragile and they often deteriorate, we should say, is because most of these are silk, right? They're silk flags.
That's correct.
With painted on, so we got painted stars. There would have been a Pennsylvania coat of arms in it, and we also should tell the viewers that there were no standards really for flag stars. An American flag in that period of time could have white stars, could have gold stars, they could be in circular patterns. It's not until in the early 20th century that the flag that you and I see today, that the stars are white, the rows are all ordered, that doesn't happen until after the Civil War. There really isn't a standard for, we know the flags have 13 stripes, but there isn't a standard really for these flag patterns that are here, but boy, the flag of the 1st Pennsylvania Reserves, the 30th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment, on the north slope of Little Round Top on July 2nd and into the stone wall at the wheat field in a counterattack against Wofford's Brigade on the evening of July 2nd, 1863. Wow. So what a great piece of history. Let's try to look at another one, Jason. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right. Here is another flag. We just saw the 1st Pennsylvania Reserves. Here's another flag that was on Little Round Top, the 6th Pennsylvania Reserves, on the northern slope of it, charging on July 2nd. And what's really great about this flag, Jason, is it's got what the coat of arms, what the actual blue field would look like for Civil War flag, right?
Yeah, this has, so this, like I said, Pennsylvania was one of the few states that gave some identifier within the canton. So this is what we call a state issue color. So it has the Pennsylvania coat of arms. And Wayne, like you said, there was no standard. So the horses back then could be white, they could be gray, they could be black on some of the colors. That wasn't really standardized for Pennsylvania until 1907. So that was rather late that our coat of arms was standardized to the black horse that you see on the PA flag. But so this is the kind of star arrangement that you see in the canton. This one's also interesting because the reserves that fought, the majority, I think there were 8 or 9 of the reserve regiments. Not all of them were at Drainesville, but Governor Curtin stipulated that they stenciled Drainesville December 20th, 1861 on their flags as the first kind of their entry into battle. That was their first baptism of fire, so to speak, at Drainesville. So they fought,
So when they're carrying this at Gettysburg, this is the stencil honor that would have been on it. Now later on they would add honors, or when they got a new set of flags, sometimes the honors are actually painted on, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Drainesville, this is a battle that there's not a lot of units involved from the Pennsylvania Reserves in that particular battle. This unit, we should say, when it charged on July 2nd, 1863, it also later on, I think the next day, I think I got the history of this right, was also involved in trying to clear out some wood lines north of Little Round Top. But the 6th Pennsylvania Reserves has the most number of medals of honor issued for any regiment in the Battle of Gettysburg.
Oh, wow.
And it actually had 6 medals of honor issued to its members for action at the Battle of Gettysburg, and that is the most of, there's 64 medals of honor given out for action at Gettysburg. There's over 70, I think 71 for the campaign, but 64 for the battle, and 6 of them go to the 6th Pennsylvania Reserve. So,
and were they were clearing out some sharpshooters, weren't they?
Yeah, this is down at around the Jacob Weichert farm. So this is north of Little Round Top, around where the Jacob Weichert property is, and the wood line that's just off north of that. So these units would have been right on the northern edge of Little Round Top, and also the little hill that's adjacent to it, we call it Munchauer Hill. That's a local German name that's there, right in that area, right there where a lot of the reserves were. And of course, they're going to go forward into the wheat field, but then they've got some other duties later on. But wow, what a 6 Pennsylvania Reserves. 6 Medal of Honor recipients, and they would have been under this banner in the Battle of Gettysburg. Wow. Let's take a look at another one. So we just left the 6th Reserves, which was on Little Round Top. This is also a unit that was on Little Round Top, and this is the 11th Pennsylvania Reserves. And what's really great about this is now we're looking at a different flag. So we just mentioned earlier that Pennsylvania regiments, at least by regulation, almost every Union unit in the Civil War I know about, Ohio had similar regulation, New York, is that they carried 2 flags. They carried a national color, and then they carried a regimental color. And we're looking at the regimental color of the 11th Pennsylvania Reserves, and it has the eagle. Now my Latin's not very good, but e paris unum, out of many, one, and then it would have the regimental number actually inscribed down at the bottom. And Jason, what do we know about this flag and the history behind it?
Yeah, this one's kind of unique in that, like you said, it's a regimental, so it's not a state issue one, but it would have come from the federal quartermaster's department. But this one's kind of, we've been here for quite a number of years, and I've had 3 flags come back into the collection, and one of them was this. So this flag was actually, we're fairly certain that this is the unidentified flag that they would have carried at Gettysburg, because they didn't have another one that's listed. Their first state flag was captured. I believe down.
So the 11th Reserves only had like one flag.
Yeah, they would have, if they had 2 flags, this was the second one, so they needed something to carry.
Right.
So this is most likely the unidentified flag that they were carrying at Gettysburg. Anyway, after the war, it was not returned to the Commonwealth for whatever reason. So it went into private hands and was sold, and ended up being in the hands of a gentleman named Francis Lord, who you and I said we know what the...
For the viewers, Francis Lord did a multi-book series called Francis Lord, the Encyclopedia of the Civil War, and this was an encyclopedia of objects, of relics, cups, and
I believe he was an authority on Southern military.
As a kid, I'd read. You'd open the thing up, and it would say, "This is what a Civil War musket looks like." So Francis Lord at one time owned this.
He owned this, and he apparently sold it after his estate. I guess after his death to a collector in England. That collector in England. I guess traded it back to a collector here locally, whose name escapes me right now.
Okay.
But he was generous enough. He said, "Well, that really belongs with the rest of the flag." So he donated it back to the collection. So that takes a special kind of individual to donate something that has this kind of. I mean, but you and I know that these have worth beyond money. These are priceless. But to find somebody that knows it belongs in a museum so that it can be preserved for all time is a special kind of individual.
It sure is. And you said since you've been here, because most of these flags came back per the Adjutant General's orders. The regiments retired these, and they came back into the state collection. But you're saying since you've been here, three of them have come back. Basically from private collectors.
In the last 25 years, we've had 3 come back into the collections.
And there's probably some more floating around out there, right?
Probably.
Somewhere. And you mentioned a little bit about the conservation of it, the screen that's on.
Yeah,
you talk a little bit about that, and then Sarah can get a close-up of it when it's
Sure. Since this one was boxed, it came back to us in a Hollinger or acid-free box, but you can see some of it wasn't furrowed like the other ones. So it was extremely what we call friable, where you can see the pieces here. So the conservator did something different, where she dyed this acid-free, what's called crepeline, and then it is pinned around the outside so that we can still show the flag, but that mesh just blends away and you can still see the color through it. So it's a way to consolidate the flag, to keep the pieces down there so it still stays intact, and we can still show it to people that want to see it.
And it's not sewn. These pieces are just laying on
These are just laying here, and they're pinned on the outside, not through the pieces, but the crepeline is pinned. So
So once again, it's amazing. I'm amazed at how much of that's intact. I really am, given all that silk. I've seen a lot of bunting flags in the Civil War made of cloth. They seem to preserve a little better.
They hold up better. The wool bunting,
We've got some in the Gettysburg collection. The silk flags, they tend to deteriorate pretty quickly, and they're thin. They're just ultra thin. But how many campfires? I just can't imagine, not just the battles, but the men sitting around the campfires talking about different things. This would have heard so many conversations of Civil War soldiers 160 years ago.
They really are. Each one's the lifeblood of the regiment.
Yeah. Jason, whenever you hear about the defense of Little Round Top, there's always one Pennsylvania regiment that you hear more about, I think, than any other, and that's part of Strong Vincent's brigade. It was his own regiment, the 83rd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment, which came out of Erie, a good portion of it. And this is the national color of the 83rd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment that fought on Little Round Top for July 2nd, 1863, right on the slope of Little Round Top. And we believe this is one that was there, huh? Yeah,
the fact that they needed one, I mean, so if you look at this, the really interesting thing is this was to go to the 157th Pennsylvania. They needed a flag so quickly that and the 157th never made muster. They were on the books, but they never got enough men. They formed it to like half a battalion strength, and they said, well, they had a flag on the books for them, but they said, well, if the 83rd needs one in such a pinch, we're going to let her over it. So I don't know whether they were miffed about having somebody else's flag.
It looks like somebody covered something up there.
Yeah, they may have. But so it was sent out. We know that it arrived at the state agency in D.C. before Chancellorsville. So the fact that it was coming south and they were moving north, we know that they had it in time.
Yeah.
Whether or not they chose to carry it at Little Round Top may be the distinction, but the fact that they needed it so quickly must mean that their first flag was in pretty bad shape, and their first flag is not in the collection. It's still at the Erie Public Library in Erie, and there's not much left of it.
Okay, because they had been the 83rd, my recollection, and was that they were heavily engaged at Gaines Mill. They were on the peninsula in some heavily engaged battles on the peninsula. These bullet holes?
Those are bullet holes. I can tell you on this one. So, if you want to say here's your proof that it took some hits on Little Round Top, I would say that.
We're wearing gloves. And by the way, for all you folks, we're doing the museum proper procedure here. We're wearing gloves. Got all acid-free materials here. We're in a controlled environment.
Yeah, and the rationale for that, Wayne, is, we're looking at the long arc of history in preservation. We want these to last several hundred more years. So, you start touching them with your hands again and getting the oils on, that's not the proper procedure. So we're very cautious. Everything is acid-free honeycomb panel, lignin, acid-free tissue paper, and they're stored in these cases outside of UV light, protected that way. So.
And we're going to get, Sarah and Abby, our social media team, are here, so we're going to get close-ups of the bullet holes that are here back. That is amazing. So if these aren't bullet holes from Gettysburg, do we know how long they carried this flag, Jason?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I can reference that, but they would have carried this through probably part of the battles of 1864. Usually that period of time, late December 64 into the early winter period of 65 is when a lot of regiments were issued their third and final state color.
And the standard procedure would, as we mentioned earlier, they'd be retired. So what's left of these things, which in some cases isn't an awful lot, depending on what kind of battle they went through, they would just retire them and receive a new state color. And sometimes these were done with a lot of fanfare. The governor would come out, make presentations, the senators. I mean, it was sometimes these were big deals.
Yeah, Governor Curtin took special pride in presenting as many as he could to the Pennsylvania regiments. And if he couldn't, he sent the adjutant general down or his designee down to present the flags to them. But he an inordinate amount for a governor to travel to wherever the regiment was and present the flags.
And we also should say for the viewers, I don't believe that we can overestimate the importance of the flag as an object, a regimental symbol for the units that carried them, not just because of a practical symbol. On a smoke-filled battlefield in the Civil War, you can't see anything. These are practical communication banners that if that banner's going forward, you better be going forward. It's going back, you go back. Wherever it goes, the units dress or rally on wherever that color is. So it's a practical communication symbol, but then also, as we know, it's a great part of regimental pride, of unit cohesion, of state pride. And so to lose a color in the Civil War, a terribly humiliating aspect. And we think back about what happens when a color is lost, and everybody's got to explain it. Look, I can tell all the viewers, if you don't know, this goes back to Roman times. In 9 AD, we call it CE now, Common Era. In 9 CE, 3 Roman legions lost their eagle, and that's a big deal. And they eventually the Romans got 2 of them back from a battle that was there on the Rhine River when Augustus was emperor. I mean, this is 2,000 years ago, and they had eagles that they were bearing, and that meant so much to the Roman legions that carried them wherever they went. It's just like these flags. To lose a flag is a terrible disgrace. People die trying to hold on to these flags, not letting it touch to the ground. Tremendous sacrifice around these. Confederate regiments in the Civil War normally carried one flag. They usually carried a 4 foot by 4 foot battle flag. Union units, as we talked about, carried 2 flags, and you're seeing it. But wow, bullet holes in the 83rd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry Regiment, and the cool factor just went way off the scale. I mean, in the back of my neck is standing up. It's hard to believe, and I say that in jest because I'm just excited to be here. We don't want to in any way try to make fun of what's going on here, because we've got serious people dying holding up this flag. But for those of us that are interested in the Civil War, this is an exciting thing. It really is. And thank you for that. So here we've got painted. They had to change the flag.
Yep, they gave it to the 157th and then sent it to the 83rd.
So Jason, the flags that we've pulled out so far have been flags carried by infantry units from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. This flag is unique and it's different. This is a brigade designating flag to designate a brigade of soldiers, and the Union Army had flag regimen. They had authorization and had ordered flags that would have been for the Corps, for the divisions, and for the brigades. And these identifying flags would have been with the brigade general at brigade headquarters, in the saddle, or wherever it is, so the couriers could go around and find out, look, I've got to give this particular message to a certain general officer or a certain brigade. Where is it? This happens to be the designation flag of Stephen Weed's brigade, which is the brigade that is on Little Round Top for the 5th Union Army Corps. It has the Maltese Cross right on it, which is the symbol for the 5th Union Army Corps. It is white, and they would normally do red, white, and blue for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Division. So this would be for the 2nd Division, I believe, of the 5th Corps, and I think it's 3rd Brigade, right? 3rd Brigade, which would have been, I think, Stephen Weed's brigade during the time of the Battle of Gettysburg. So it's possible this flag was on Little Round Top as Stephen Weed's designation flag.
I would guess, would be 98% sure that that's true. So.
And Jason, do you know how, because this would not have been a Commonwealth flag. This
would have been a national issue. This would have been issued at the federal quartermaster's level. But just like the fact that we have national colors here that were issued by the national, basically the federal government had no provisions for these colors afterwards, so that the states kind of took over in their state arsenals these colors. Now this one was actually somebody, whether he was with the headquarters company for Weed's unit, but this was given back to us by a gentleman from Northumberland, Pennsylvania in 1922. So it actually came back into the collection. He was a Pennsylvania soldier, didn't know where to give it, so it went to the state arsenal. State arsenal put it into the flag cases, probably in the main rotunda, and that's where it stayed until it was conserved in 1985.
Now, Stephen Weed was a New Yorker. He was mortally wounded at Gettysburg, on Little Round Top, by the way. And at least one of the regiments, I think, in his brigade, 155th Pennsylvania, it's a unit. So there's, I forget what other units, 91st PA might have been in his. Now we'll have to go back and check. All the viewers are going to say, Wayne was right, he couldn't remember.
We'll reference it. We're kind of pulling this, we were kind of shooting from the hip on this one. So
we're having so much fun. We did say to Jason, we'd like to see some flags. This is one that I didn't realize was here, and you said, hey, it's here, Wayne. So Wayne said, let's just pull it out.
Wayne had a list, and then we went off book.
We went off script. We're off teleprompter. That's what happened here. So if we get any of this history wrong, we're sorry, but you got to see the flag. That's the most important thing. Forget about anything else that's over here. Wow, that's just, and these are pretty good size too. I don't know if I've ever seen, I might have seen one other. I don't know if the Park has one. I can't remember, but these are pretty good size.
Park has a division level one, don't they?
And the National Civil War Museum has a division level one too. They've got one that belonged to Caldwell's division. It's a pretty good, which is also in the wheat field of Gettysburg, which was pretty nice. But this flag probably on Little Round Top was Stephen Weed. Wow, it just doesn't get any more history than that. Well, we've covered 5 flags. I think, is that right, guys? We've covered 5 flags that are here. I think that's pretty good for us, Jason. And we got to see some where there's only parts, some where there isn't very much. But the first thing we want to say is we really appreciate Jason Wilson, the Capitol Preservation Committee here at the Pennsylvania Civil War Battle Flag Education Center for making time this morning for us to come out and take a look at this. You too can come see the Education Center and these flags if you make an appointment. With the opening of Little Round Top, I just thought it would be really great to do Gettysburg on the Road and do a segment that has to do with some flags up here related. And folks, as far as I'm concerned, and Jason, maybe we can round you up as part 2 sometime. We can do some other flags. To me, this is like part 1. We're going to announce it here, and now we'll have to probably be obligated to make sure we do it right. But I just think it's great. I think we could come up and tell some stories about some other flags.
I think we have 74, 78 regiments that we're getting through.
So
we've got a few to go through.
We could take them at parts, and we could do some more. But we hope everybody really enjoys this video because just great pieces of history. And let me say, to me, as somebody it's so important in my lifetime working on all the things that I've worked on, in your lifetime working what you're working on, that the soldiers that carried these flags, the units that they're under, get the recognition, the pain, the suffering, the sacrifice, the service. We can't put any of that into words. I want to thank Jason and the folks at the Capitol Preservation Committee. And I also want to say, if you enjoyed these videos, be sure to go down to the bottom of this video and press on subscribe. Subscribe and follow us on social media, and make sure you share these videos and give everybody this great history. Thank you very much.